Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, which is brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open account at Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. My name is Dave Rodrelli. I am joined by Harman Dial, and it is Canucks Conversation. It is not game day edition, but postgame. Two postgame edition of Canucks Conversation. And we've got two games where I thought it was a good team effort from the Canucks, but ultimately, we talk about the big moments and the Canucks not getting big moments from their stars, except for goaltenders, which I thought Artur Silovs played well on Sunday, and obviously Kevin Lankinen was great on Saturday. But we talk about the big moments, and it feels like Elias Pettersson is at the forefront of that conversation after the weekend.
Yes, but two things I would slightly push back on. Number one, good team effort. Yeah, they were solid defensively, but in my mind, especially in the Utah game, a team that is behind you in the race for a wild card spot, I'm not giving them a lot of credit for a game where they got decisively outshot, where they didn't create anything offensively. Again, yeah, they didn't allow a lot of grade A chances, but to me, that wasn't a good enough effort. That wasn't a good enough performance. It was a similar story in Vegas, but at least in the Vegas game, you could say, well, the Golden Knights are an upper echelon Stanley Cup contender. You can't say that about Utah. They were also on the leg of a second leg of a back-to-back, so couldn't use fatigue as an issue. And to me, especially in the Utah one, you wasted a really solid start from Artur Silovs, where, let's be honest, how many people thought that Silovs was going to perform as well as he did last night? So it's a little bit disappointing, and I know we're going to talk about Elias Pettersson, but one thing I've thought about over this weekend is about how many of this team's offensive struggles span beyond just EP40. Like, yeah, we're going to have the EP40 conversation. Pettersson is at the forefront of the conversation. He's the biggest underperformer on this roster by a mile. It's not even close. But we're talking about a team, and I'm going to rattle off some numbers here. They got 3 5-on-5 goals in the last 5 games. Now, Quinn Hughes is out, obviously, but you want to expand the sample size. Since November 15, so this is 42 games, Quinn has appeared in 32 of them. 2.6 goals, 4 per game, second last in the NHL. 23 shots per 60 at 5-on-5, second last in the NHL. 2.1 expected goals for per 60 at 5-on-5. Second last in the NHL. The Canucks don't have a single forward who's on pace to hit 60 points this season. These issues, to me, offensively, are more than just Elias Pettersson.
That 60-point stat is crazy. Like, think about what we were projecting at the start of the year. And that's the thing, is think about what the Canucks were projecting at the start of the year. When you're doing your planning in the offseason, you say, okay, we need this many goals to be a playoff team. We think we're going to be able to stop this many goals. Like, this year has not gone according to plan. Like, I don't think anybody in the Canucks front office saw this coming. I really don't think anyone saw this coming to this extent. And yes, we are going to talk about Elias Pettersson because he is at the forefront. Again, I think our official policy on this show has to be, okay, we're not going to... It's almost like when we criticize the team, how we say, except Quinn Hughes. Let's just say when we are criticizing Elias Pettersson, we're not going to bring up but he played well defensively. He plays well defensively every night. He was great defensively last night. Awesome. Great. Doesn't matter. That's going to be our official policy. Do you agree? Are you good with that? If we're talking
fully
about
on board.
Pettersson, don't come in our chat saying, well, he was good defensively. We know that, okay? So that's going to be our official policy. Just like we've stopped saying, but Quinn Hughes, when we're criticizing the team, everybody knows that. Everybody knows Elias Pettersson plays well defensively. I do want to talk about Elias Pettersson, Harm, because he hasn't been good enough. The struggles dating back to before the Four Nations break. I know it's only been 2 games, but it continued through Four Nations. It happens again here. It came out today. I think it was Rick Dhaliwal that reported the Four Nations injury wasn't so much as an injury as it was illness, and he played. So I feel for him there, but it is more of the same, right? Like, it is just more of the same of what we've seen. So this isn't what's changed for him. It's more of what we've seen all season long. The thing that I'm concerned with, Harm, is the moments, right? Like, when it comes to that big moment, which was the breakaway in the third period with just under 10 minutes to go, like, that is the moment where you need a star player. When you look at how this team is constructed, like, that is the moment where you need your star player, who hasn't been playing great, to come through and just deliver on the big moment, he skies the puck over the net, and then Utah goes the other way and scores a few minutes later. Canucks go on to lose 2-1. It wasn't good enough. The stuff that really interested me was the stuff that came post-game. Do you want to get to that, or did you have thoughts that you want to say about Pettersson?
Like one more thing, the most frustrating play for me, actually, the missed opportunity on the breakaway was the best chance he had to score. But the play that frustrated me the most watching him was on the power play where he made the quick pass to Höglander. Höglander makes a quick pass to Pettersson. Pettersson has an opportunity to step in. He's in the high slot area, and instead of shooting, he tries deferring back to Höglander at a bad angle, and Marino deflects it out of play with a stick. It's like that's the moment, the reluctance to shoot, the lack of killer instinct where you got the puck in the slot. You just gotta step in and really lean on it. And that's one of the most frustrating Pettersson plays in a long time, because the player we knew him to be in the past would not hesitate for a second. He would step in and rip that bar down. And now he's just consistently passing up those shots.
Let's get to Rick Tocchet. Post-game, this is what Rick Tocchet said, and these were general terms, but there's a story that goes along with this. So we're going to take you on the timeline. This is Rick Tocchet, post-game. Technical producer Jake Debrusk, pull it up.
Frustrating part, I think, is like we had 21 block shots, or I think it was 15 missed shots. It's 30-something chances to, you can't, we're struggling to score goals, but you got to move your feet, you got to change angles, you got to hit the net. That's a big number for a team that's not scoring. So I'd rather guys just take a little bit off it, hit the net, and get people in net, because we're double clutching, and I think that's lack of confidence. So we got to take a couple of days here and figure this out.
So Rick Tocchet is speaking in pretty general terms there, using words like we are double clutching. Not one guy is double clutching. Not one guy is having these issues. We, using very, bringing the whole team in with it, saying this is all of us. Even he's double clutching based on the pronouns that he used in those answers. Got a little more direct when he spoke after the scrum with Sportsnet's Ian McIntyre, who published the following quote. You can just pull it up, Jacob. I'm just going to read it. This is what Tocchet said when he was asked about Pettersson specifically, and he was very honest when he brought this up. This was from the article that IMAC wrote. There it is. We've talked about he has to move his feet and can't double clutch with the puck. I think he's waiting for something. I don't know if it's a lack of confidence in his shot, but as soon as he has room, he's got to take it and just got to blast it. I'd rather him just rip a puck right now. He's not moving his feet. I thought today some shifts he was moving his feet and it looked like we had some glimpses, but 6-on-5 there at the end, it's the same thing. Waiting. If he just takes 3 or 4 strides, I don't know if it's a mental block right now all year, but he's got to move his feet. So that is a boiling point, right? Like that is a boiling point for Tocchet to outright call out Pettersson like that. We just haven't seen that this year. It's been those terms like and you can always think, and we always come on this show and say, oh, it sounds like he's talking about Elias Pettersson with that criticism that he had post game. Now he's making it clear. Yes, this is about Elias Pettersson. Pettersson is then asked by IMAC for kind of his take on it all. And this is what IMAC wrote. When we asked Pettersson whether confidence is a factor when struggling to score, the alternate captain said, it's more annoying dealing with the media. And then IMAC with the absolute dagger. I love when IMAC picks his spots, because here it is. He goes, well, there's only 7 years left on that contract. A+ from Ian McIntyre. I shot him a text too. The bringing up that he's an alternate captain, 10 out of 10. Like that's the thing. Us young bucks, Harm, we know our stuff, obviously. But when you've been on the beat for, not to age IMAC too much, but when you've been on the beat for like 20 plus years, like you do start to just know when to pick your spot. And IMAC picked his spot perfectly here. Pointing out that Pettersson's an alternate captain, obviously not acting like one with that answer. And then also just the little barb, the 7 years left on that contract line is great. It's awesome. Love that from IMAC.
Seeing that quote was extremely disappointing for me, because Pettersson's the 5th highest paid player in the league, and he might not hit 55 points this year. Of course, people are going to ask questions. It's the biggest question that every Canucks fan I run into in person, the first question is about EP. What's wrong? Mm-hmm. Or some level of frustration. Why isn't he getting it going? 11.6. Like, he is the sole focus on everybody's mind, especially now that JT Miller's gone. there's nowhere for him to kind of
And
hide.
he's hardly been asked about it. Like, that's the thing. He's hardly been asked about it.
The other thing, part two, is IMAC is probably the most friendly writer in our local media pool. He doesn't have a toxic bone in his body. He's been very fair to Petey in his coverage over all of these years, including this season. It's like, why are you being sassy with him?
That's such a good point. That's
like, he's the most genuinely, like, if you have certain problems with X guys, X media members specifically, okay,
whatever.
What are
you talking about?
Like, what do you mean?
I'm just joking. I was asking you to name names.
I don't know if Pettersson has any problems with
sure.
any specific media members, but the point being, of all the guys in the media pool to sort of throw that barb at, I mean, IMAC is the friendliest guy. And just, I mean, I've covered this team for 5 or 6 seasons now. I've seen him interact with all sorts of players. IMAC is universally well liked. I don't know of a player that doesn't have time for him. So that especially it being IMAC specifically was disappointing to me because he has been so fair to Petey.
Yeah.
And all of his coverage about the team as a whole.
And this is the thing, is it is such a soft media environment here. And I say that as someone that's a part of that media environment. I'm not at the rink every day. I can't be at the rink every day anymore, but I was for like a full season. And I do go to the rink and I do talk to these players. Someone's got to get in there and just be like, hey, like, the local media aren't really your enemy. Like, you don't like what you're seeing on social media and you don't like what's coming out of the national podcasts and all that sort of stuff. And I know that's an issue for the players. Like, I know that that's where the main issue lies for a lot of these players. I'm obviously not going to name names, but like, there's been players who have outright said, just been like, yeah, like, we've no problem with the local guys. It's the national that we have issues with because they just like to stir stuff up. And we're not naming names. We're not naming names here, but like, someone's got to get in there and tell a guy like Petey, like, hey, like, just play ball with Ian McIntyre. Like, that's part of your job. And that's the thing, is that's why I like that IMAC throws in the alternate captain line, because that is part of the job. Like, you don't see Quinn Hughes do that, even when Quinn Hughes is at his worst.
Well, even earlier in the season when Drancer tried to talk to Pettersson
in Chicago
about his early struggles in Chicago, it was the same sort of thing. And again, Drancer is a guy, he has had Petey's back many times. He's been so fair in his coverage of Petey. And it's like, even the media members that have been pro Petey and have been accused of being at times too soft on you, like, you're not even gonna show like a basic level of professionalism there. That's disappointing.
I don't know where to go from here. I really don't.
Well, I want to talk about some of the offensive woes beyond Pettersson.
Okay, wait. No. We're not done Pettersson.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying.
Right,
we're not done Pettersson. That's what I'm saying. I don't know where you go from here with Elias Pettersson. I know where the show's going. I know what we're going to talk about next. I don't know where you go from here with Elias Pettersson. Like, does this become this has to get done before the trade deadline thing?
I don't think you want to make any hasty decisions.
Sure.
I still stick to,
I think it's on its way.
Wait through this season, especially a contract that big.
Mm-hmm.
How many teams can fit that contract midseason?
Yep, fair enough. Not many. Okay, you want to talk more? Go.
Yeah, so we all know Pettersson is the sort of boiling point topic in this market. And yeah, he deserves criticism for how poorly he's playing this season and recently. But you can't pin the lack of offensive generation for the C1-1 guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more you look into it, there are deep-rooted issues with how little they create offensively. First thing that stands out personnel-wise, the lack of speed in high-end top six drivers. And I'll get to coaching. Don't worry. I know a lot of people are going to come out here with what about the coaching? What about Rick Tocchet? That's coming too. The first thing that stands out, though, is the lack of high-end top six drivers. The Canucks on their roster right now only have 2 forwards who've ever topped 55 points in a season throughout their entire NHL career. That is Elias Pettersson, that is Brock Boeser. You compare that to other Pacific Division playoff teams, the Oilers have 7 forwards who've had a 55-point season. The Vegas Golden Knights, after an offseason where they lost a lot of talent, including Jonathan Marchessault, and people were talking about, they don't have a lot of high-end forward talent. They've got 5 forwards who've topped 55 points in their career at one point. The LA Kings, a team that is always talked about as they're great defensively. They lack offensive pop. And even ahead of this year's deadline, their biggest need is adding a right shot scoring forward. They have 5. And that doesn't even include Philip Deneau, who's had a 54-point season and was 1 point away from turning that number into 6. You've got a scenario where Drew O'Connor and Kiefer Sherwood are in your top 6. That's problematic. Connor Garland leads Canucks forwards in ice time this season. That's an indictment on the lack of elite forwards this team has. I love Connor Garland, but he's the type of guy that a contender like Vegas would add and stash to play 13 to 14 minutes and be an elite third liner, not your highest ice time forward.
Is it fair to say, and not to deviate the conversation too much, but is it also fair to say that like Connor Garland's lost some jump because of the way he plays, and that's probably not sustainable over an 82 game season when you're playing as many minutes as he now is? Like, is it fair to say that like he probably has his best games when he's in that 13 to 15 minute range?
Probably. I don't mind him being closer to 15, 16 minutes and being part of your top 6 team once in a while, but he shouldn't be leading your team in ice time. And I'm not saying that as a shot at Rick Tocchet's deployment. I'm saying that as with JT Miller gone and Pettersson playing at this caliber, it's an issue that they're having to lean this heavily on him. And the lack of production speaks for itself for Garland. He's only got 9 points in his last 30 games. 30 games, that's more than a third of the season. Mm-hmm. He's only got 4 points in his last 17. He's got none in his last 6. And in that 30-game stretch, the Canucks have scored just 7 goals with Garland on the ice at 5-on-5. So they're averaging a 5-on-5 goal score with Garland on the ice like every 4 to 5 games. His line. Like, that's anemic. We're talking less than 1.2 goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. They're getting no offense out of that line. And again, Garland was amazing through the first 25 games. I'm not pinning this as Connor Garland hasn't been good enough this season, but man, he's scuffling lately. And the fact that he's relied upon this heavily is an indictment on the lack of top end forwards this team has.
I want to talk about Brock Boeser. I don't know how you watched Utah last night and their young, speedy forwards and think to yourself, like, yeah, you got to extend Brock Boeser at whatever he's asking for. And for those that haven't listened, the official Canucks Conversation policy is that if Brock Boeser will accept a 7x7, the Canucks should do that. 7 years, $7 million, Canucks should get that done. And Brock Boeser might do that. Maybe it's the Canucks that don't want to do that. We don't know the answer. But when we talk about Brock Boeser and if the Canucks should keep him, my idea is trading him at the deadline has to be what you're doing if you're not going to extend him. This idea of keeping him as your own rental is insane to me. I don't like this idea at all. This to me just screams of a team that doesn't have a direction. If you go into a trade deadline and say, yeah, you know what? We're going to keep Brock Boeser as our own rental. I get it if you're like, okay, we think we might be able to sign him. We think we might be able to get it done. And you're honestly saying that you're not just putting that out there in the media so that guys like me don't call you out for keeping him as your own rental. If you honestly think you can sign Brock Boeser and that it might get done in the offseason, then maybe I can understand it. But if you know you're going to lose him in free agency and you're not even going to make a competitive attempt to sign him, you have to move him at the deadline. You have to. Like, you cannot hitch your wagon to Brock Boeser long-term at a cap hit you're not comfortable with. And you also can't just say, yeah, you know what? We don't think we're going to get something done, but probably helps us get to that first round playoff revenue money. Like, we don't think that we're going to win past the first round too much, but we're going to get to the first round. We're going to make the playoffs. We're going to beat out the Calgary Flames for this playoff spot. Brock Boeser helps us do that, so we're keeping Brock Boeser. That's the wrong approach to the deadline.
It'd be a reckless approach. Yeah. And I asked Patrick Alvin after the Marcus Pettersson and JT Miller trades about that point blank. Would they be comfortable keeping Boeser as their own rental, or do they view him as too valuable of an asset to risk losing him for nothing in free agency? And Alvin said they haven't made that decision yet. Mm-hmm. Now, I think part of that was giving the team an opportunity, waiting to see, okay, how does this team look and perform and play after these two seismic trades. But this weekend has, if you weren't already 99% convinced before this weekend that this team probably doesn't look like a cup contender, this weekend should have done it. They don't have enough offensive juice. And again, we know they're missing Quinn Hughes. We know how impactful he's been, but also even with Quinn, we know he's playing through a couple of major injuries now, because even before the reported oblique injury, which you confirmed, we know that he's been playing with that hand contraption. Quinn, when he comes back, even if he's hampered, he can still be an exceptional player. But can he lead you to a deep playoff run when he's going to be targeted nonstop? Highly, highly unlikely.
And he has no other guys helping him. That's
exactly. I mean, that's the main issue. Plus the uncertainty around Demko's health and injury status, and not having any confidence that he can return to being, let's say, the type of goaltender who just like gets hot, plays at a Vezina level, and even though you might be an 8th seed, you win a round or two. Like, I just don't see a path for this team having playoff success this year. And this team is so thin on assets and has so many needs for next season that, in my mind, if you can't come to a compromise extension with Boeser, you have to deal him. And the hard part too in all of this is, you and I both look at it and go, with the price that Boeser is likely to command, it's probably in the club's best interest to move on. A 7-8 year commitment probably wouldn't age well, especially if the cap hit starts with an 8 or an 8.5. But we're talking about a team that's completely anemic offensively, and you're saying let's subtract a 30-goal scorer from that. Like, that's tough too. And I know you can find scoring wingers in free agency or via trade.
Yep.
But the point is, even if you find the next Brock Boeser at a cheaper or comparable price, you need so much more. You need so much more top of the lineup skill that it's just a really tough position for this organization to be in.
Here's my official policy. And there's people in the chat right now that are saying 7x7, that's too much. I ain't going to sit here and say, no, it's not. Trust me, 7x7 is a great idea. If you have the opinion that Brock Boeser isn't worth 7x7, I'm okay with that. Like, I don't necessarily agree, but I'm not going to sit here and say, no, you're totally off on that. That's a fine opinion to have. Again, I bring up Utah's young, speedy core. I look at how much the Canucks struggle to play with speed. Like, even just last night, Harm, how many times did you see Brock Boeser just try to get the puck off his stick when he's under like hardly any pressure? And like, he's got the IQ, but man, like, he just knows he doesn't have the juice in his legs, so he's just chipping it away, or he's trying to find a pass. And then you look at a guy like Philip Hedl, Drew O'Connor, just immediately attacking with speed. Even Hedl last night didn't think he had the best game, but there was still a few forays into the offensive zone where he's just going at it with speed. And man, like, I just want to see more of that. And ultimately, I think what it comes down to is you can't have the idea that, he's going to be our own rental. If you want your own rental, go get Jonathan Lekkerimäki out from the Abbotsford. Bring him up. He's been dealing with injuries and stuff. He'll be fine by the trade deadline. That's your acquisition. That's your guy where you just say, you know what? Go cook in the top 6. Play your minutes in the top 6, and we got to figure this out, because he needs to be on the team next year. That's the other thing that people aren't really talking about enough, is that Jonathan Lekkerimäki needs to be on the team next year. Tom Willander, to a lesser extent, needs to be on the team next year. I don't know if he will be. Maybe they'll get him some time in the AHL, but I absolutely think highly enough of the player that he could be in the NHL next year, and that would be a huge advantage for the Canucks to add that into their top 4 defense group, or bottom 4 if he's playing third pair minutes. But honestly, like, you can't go into this trade deadline and say, we don't really know what we want to do with Brock Boeser. We might just keep him, and whatever happens. It's just that's mismanagement. And like you said, Harm, it is reckless. That's a reckless approach to this trade deadline for the Canucks.
The other thing I'll mention with respect to the lack of top forwards, how did we get here? Part of the issue is when this management group took over, they were so thin on the back end, right? It was Quinn Hughes and then basically nobody, because the Jim Benning regime was woeful, disastrous when it came to supplementing the blue line through drafted development, trades, free agency. This management regime was dealt a horrible hand on the back end outside of Quinn Hughes. So what did they do? They went out and indirectly exchanged Bo Horvat for Filip Hronek, which has worked out wonderfully. You can't deny that. With even the JT Miller trade, that's indirectly turned into Marcus Pettersson. So now you look at it and go, their back end's in a pretty solid position with Hughes, Hronek, Marcus Pettersson. But you had to exchange some of your top forwards to solve those needs on the back end. And I'm not bringing that up to say, oh, they should have kept Bo or kept JT in both instances. Horvat because of the contract he ended up signing, and JT because of all the locker room dysfunction. Both of them needed to go, but that just sort of illustrates from a roster construction standpoint, I think, how we've ended up where you turn some of your excess sort of like strength up front into solving your needs on the back end, but then it created issues up front.
So what now? Like, where do they go from here? And I mean, I think that's going to be a big topic of a show this week because the Canucks have a couple days off before their next game against the Kings. Where do they go from here? Like, just surface level, where do they go from here? I think they have to seriously consider trading Elias Pettersson. I think that's where I'm at.
I'm waiting through the season. I don't think there are enough buyers with cap space right now. Plus, for as tough as it looks right now, I don't think the situation, put it this way, I don't think his trade value becomes significantly worse if you hold him past the deadline and are shopping him at the draft. Plus, I'm mentioning the lack of top forwards. Let's say, like, we don't know why he's struggling to this extent. If it comes out in the future that, oh, this was primarily injury related, and he ends up bouncing back next season, like, you'll end up looking like a fool if you dealt him at the deadline when he was banged up, and he ends up getting healthier and returns to being at least a point per game centerman. So it's like that's something you've got to, like. Yes, I'm not against the idea of trading Pettersson in the offseason if he continues slumping to this degree. Absolutely, that's a conversation to have. But I'm not rushing to make decisions until I know exactly why he's struggling to this extent.
Okay, two things. First of all, I had a dream last night that a team, and I don't remember. I don't think it came to me in the dream which team it was. I had a dream that a team traded for Elias Pettersson at the deadline, put him on LTIR, he healed his knee, and then he was over a point per game in the playoffs for that team. But I don't know the team. I had the dream, though, that was what happened. So, official Quads prediction, Noah Dobson, 8 years at $10 million, because I had that in a dream, and then this as well. Pettersson gets traded to a team at the deadline. They say, whoa, this imaging on your knee that we did looks really bad. We're just going to LTIR you, get 11.6 million in cap space for the rest of the season, and then we're gonna bring you in for the playoffs. And then he came alive in the playoffs. So that was a dream I had. So do with that what you will. The second thing is we got a super chat. This one from Elfrin Cliffhanging Canuck, who's a regular listener of the show, said, besides 43, who do you think is Alvin and Rutherford's key core players? Horvat's out, Miller's out, 6 and 35 potentially out, Pettersson nowhere to be found. I think you answered your own question. It's 43. I think they really like Marcus Pettersson. I think they really like Philip Hronek. I think if you asked Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin at the end of season media avail, if all these guys are actually moved, of who is your core, they'll say, well, right now it's Quinn Hughes and it's Philip Hronek. We really like Philip Heedle's game. And we're really hoping Jonathan Lecker-Mackey and Tom Willander can take a significant step and come in here next season. I think that's the answer you'd get.
Yeah, you'd probably add Debrusk to that list as well because he's on a manageable contract long term.
Lankinen was just signed for 5 years.
There you go.
Boy, how far have we come from last year's All-Star? Like this, remember last year when it was the 6 All-Stars together? Like every guy was contending for awards. Like Quinn Hughes won the Norris, and good chance he might do that again this year if he's able to get healthy in time. JT Miller was top 10 in scoring. Elias Pettersson for a while was top 10 in scoring. Thatcher Demko was the Vezina runner-up to Connor Hellebuck. Brock Boeser was a 40-goal scorer. Man, it's amazing how quickly things change. The other thing that I think we have to talk about is with respect to the lack of offensive generation, can't overlook Rick Tocchet. Now, I think I made it clear that they have an underwhelming forward group. They don't have enough top forwards. I laid it out, comparing it to Edmonton, Vegas, LA. I think that's the primary issue. But even with those limitations, they shouldn't be the 31st ranked offensive team since November 15th, the 42-game sample, when Quinn Hughes has been healthy for most of that sample and has been playing at a borderline Hart Trophy level. They're anemic off the rush. you need to find a way to get more juice out of this group. And yeah, Taki can turn to his platitudes. Like, guys need to move their feet. They need to defer less to the point. But ultimately, there's still enough talent here where they shouldn't be second worst offensively in basically every offensive category since mid-November, given the personnel that they have.
Yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And we thank that listener for the super chat and the donation to the BC Mental Health Foundation. His with the super chat and donate to the BC Mental Health Foundation. Okay, this is from Hamalytics on Twitter, an account I really like, by the way. Make sure you're following at Ham, like the food, Alytics, as in analytics, but ham, you get it, Hamalytics.
I'll be honest, the first time I saw this account, I thought it was Harmalytics, and I'm like, is this like Harman's secret account? But no, it is not. It's just Hamalytics.
So this is what he tweeted. He said, in their last 12 games, the Canucks have scored 9 goals with Hughes on the ice, 4.45 goals for per 60, 6 goals without Hughes on the ice, 0.91 goals for per 60. Harm, did you know that Quinn Hughes has missed the last 6 games? So, again, that's half of the games without Hughes, half of the games in that sample with Hughes, and they have just been 6 goals without Hughes on the ice. 6!
I'll also say this: when Hughes returns, this team better start creating a lot more. Otherwise, it's going to be a bad. I think it's going to start becoming a worse and worse look on Tocchet.
Yep.
Because one of the biggest reasons we defended him, especially in the first half, was lack of puck movers. Right? You got guys like Vinny Desharnais, Derek Forbert, Noah Juleson on the blue line. Philip Hronek goes out, so they can't move the puck. How are they going to transport to the forwards?
Yep.
What can you even do as a coach when you can't exit the zone with possession? But now that Hronek is healthy, when Hughes comes back, you added Marcus Pettersson. DPD's been a revelation. Overall, through losing Desharnais and Juleson, this is a more mobile group. They can move the puck competently now. They need to start creating a lot more offense when Quinn Hughes is back. And I'm going to throw out a Hail Mary option there. This isn't going to fix the offense, but at this point, in my opinion, you have to give it a shot. You got to give Nils Höglander a turn in the top 6.
Oh, baby. Oh, baby.
You have to, because you're relying on O'Connor and Sherwood in regular top 6 spots. Nobody's creating offense. I mentioned Connor Garland has 4 points in his last 17 games. You look at Höglander, and yes, the points haven't been there yet, but he's been buried on the fourth line. And you look at the last 30 games, he has the best offensive analytics among the team's forwards. When Höglander's been on the ice, the last 30 games, the Canucks have generated 26 shots on goal per 60 and 2.71 expected goals per 60. That is by far the best rate on the team among forwards. Their actual goals for rate too. So don't come at me with these shots, chances, whatever. 2.65 goals for per 60. Actual goals is also team leading in the last 30 games. Canucks have outscored opponents 12-2 with Höglander on the ice at 5-on-5 in the last 30 games. I'm not saying he's a perfect option, right? We know on a contending team, he wouldn't, even at his best, Höglander isn't a full-time top 6 guy, but relative to your other winger options, you got to give him a crack in my opinion.
He scored 24 goals last year.
I didn't even mention that. I made that case without even mentioning that.
You did a great job. People in the chat were already bringing it up. I like the idea, and Conversation said this as well. As you were talking there, I would configure it with Höglander, Pettersson, Garland. Do you remember how much juice that line had at the start of the year? We were talking about that trio, and we had so many good things to say about them. I would absolutely try that again. I would absolutely try that trio once again. I think you have to at this point. Harm, I don't disagree with you at all about Höglander. He has been one of the best Canucks over the last little while, so absolutely get him out there and see what you can do.
Another realization that we're having in this market with Filipino, I think, is he's flashy every game. He's so dynamic. He creates, consistently involved in creating chances, but we're figuring out that it's a point that Johnny Lazarus made when he came on the show and he had the Rangers perspective. Gets 3 or 4 quality looks every game. The finishing isn't always there. Mm-hmm. The finishing is, you can start to understand why he hasn't been a player that has been an explosive producer. he'll make these dazzling forays, but whether it's putting himself in a shooting position and he can't quite bury it because he doesn't have the best shot, or whether it's setting up teammates and finding the perfect plays, that last just finishing isn't there. And I think that is a limitation on his skill set. I don't think that's he's been so unlucky. I think clearly when you look at what people in the New York market were saying with we're saying about Hedl, that's a limitation of his game. And then again, that's not to knock or criticize him, but that's why he to this point hasn't been a top 6 centerman.
What have you thought of Dakota Joshua? And it's not anyone else yet, but Dr. Haas said, when are we going to stop feeling bad for Dakota Joshua and make him more accountable? First of all, I'm never going to stop feeling bad for Dakota Joshua, and I know that's not what you're saying, but when are we going to, just talk about his performance on the ice? And my take on this, Harm, is that obviously we know what he went through in the offseason, and none of us can say, he should have been good to go by December. He should have found his game. Let's not forget that before he went down with an injury, what was it, like January he had the injury? Right before that, whenever it was, he had just started to find his stride. Like, he was just starting. There was like 3 games where they were like, oh, there he is. There, it's back. He's back. He's got his legs back under him. He's finding what made him successful last season. He found it. And then he got hurt again. I actually thought Dakota Joshua last night, especially last night, I noticed him. I thought he was really starting to show those same signs of finding his game. So I say like a week or two. I don't think we're going to be talking about Dakota Joshua and saying like, when's he going to figure it out? I'm calling it now. Dakota Joshua's figuring it out in the next week or so. I'll say it now. I think he is going to find it because he's showing me a lot of the same signs I saw the last time earlier this season when he found his game.
Yeah, he was really noticeable to me last night as well. I had that down in my notes. I'm not as certain that he'll find that level. The underlying numbers aren't quite there yet. That's the other difference, was the underlying numbers are also there. It was, okay, he's actually driving play. So I love what I saw from Joshua last night in terms of how he was breaking plays up, looking quicker on his feet, a nuisance on the forecheck. But I'm not there yet as far as like I'm certain he's going to be back within the next 2-3 weeks to being the player that he was last season. And to be totally honest, from my perspective, he gets a pass this season.
Mm-hmm. It's fair.
Not just between the cancer, but the other injury he dealt with. The fact that it's been a tough environment for anybody to create offense. Yep. It'd be a different situation where imagine a guy's coming back from injury, from cancer, and it's last year's version of the Canucks where everything is sunshine and rainbows. Your line mates are all going. It's harder to create too when your line mates are going quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And I alluded to, I brought up the statistics for Garland over the last 30 games and how quiet he's been as an offensive driver. We know that Joshua's pretty reliant on Garland to create offensively too. Now, I'm sure part of that is related, right? Like part of the reason Garland's maybe been less effective is because Joshua hasn't quite been himself. But I think that has more of a detrimental impact on Joshua's game than it does on Garland, because Garland's more of a self-driver, a self-starter. But Joshua gets a pass from me for this season, to be totally honest, given all the circumstances.
Absolutely, and that's fair. I'm just saying I think he is going to turn it around again. The way he did. Like, do you agree with me, though, that he did find his game for those, like, 2 or 3 games that we saw?
Yeah, I thought he was excellent last night.
Okay. Oh, no, sorry. I meant before he went down with the injury, remember?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we were talking about that on pod before he got hurt.
Totally.
He was trending in the right direction, and the two-way numbers were showing that too. The Canucks were decisively like out-shooting and out-chancing teams with him on the ice.
Okay, well, we've forgotten to do some ad reads. I've forgotten to do some ad reads, so I'm going to do a couple of those. Sit tight, Harm, because we have to get to anyone else. But before that, I want to tell you about the Daily Faceoff Trade Deadline Special. Did you know that the trade deadline's coming up, folks? It's on March 7th, and from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific, the DFO Live team is going to be live breaking down every single move as it happens. Instant reaction, expert analysis, and all the behind-the-scenes drama of the biggest trades and news around the league. Plus, we've got special guests lined up throughout the show to give you exclusive insights from some of the biggest names in the game. There's going to be a lot happening on that day. We always hope that when it comes to trade deadline. But I'll tell you, last year, the year before that as well, the Daily Faceoff Trade Deadline Show was the place to be. It is on March 7th. It's on YouTube. You can find it on the social channels as well. Make sure you're subscribed to Daily Faceoff. It is going to be a ton of fun, and you won't want to miss it. What's our planned trade deadline? Usually we do like a wrap-up show. I feel like we'll do that, right? We'll do a podcast and a trade deadline. You good with that?
Sure, yeah. I love how we just make these plans on the fly, on air.
I mean, the trade deadline's on a Friday, and the actual deadline will be basically right before our show goes live anyway. So it'll be a regular Canucks Combo episode. We'll just kind of do a bit of a trade deadline wrap-up as a part of it.
They play Minnesota that night, too.
I believe that is correct, yes.
All right.
So it'll be trade deadline wrap-up and then previewing that game. It'll be, as Quads always says, a lot to get to on Canucks Conversation.
Love it. Attaboy. Love it. We'll also play Family Feud that day. No, just kidding. We're not going to play Family Feud that day because we play Family Feud on Thursdays. Speaking of which, Jacob, how's the surveys going?
Still need more. We usually do, but it is only Monday. So if you just haven't gotten a chance yet, please do. We are over halfway there. I just checked. We're at 51 responses. So if everyone watching on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever you're watching, please go fill out the survey. We should be at 100 well in advance of Thursday's episode.
Okay. You think it's going to be an easy one or tough? What do you think?
Looking at it right now, I'm actually pretty happy with this data. We've got some questions with a good spread. We've got a few with some clear number one answers. So it should be more difficult than the last couple of weeks, but I still think if this holds up, should still be attainable.
Okay. Did you see Trevor Zegras got suspended for 3 games?
No, I didn't see the play last night.
It was on Rasmussen. Yeah, okay. You did see it then.
I saw the news. I didn't see the hit.
Okay, let's pull it up. Jacob, pull it up. Jacob's gonna find that.
Okay, I need a couple.
Take your time. Take your time. If you have that for anyone else, we'll talk about that and anyone else. And then Ryan Hartman's suspension also got decreased.
Yeah, to 8 games.
8 games. Yeah. Okay. Before we get to anyone else, I want to tell you about a vehicle, and that vehicle would be the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X. Plenty of space. And it comes with the peace of mind that knowing you're driving a Toyota. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives, and now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X from 3.29% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today, and we've got a contest to tell you about. Rather, Pacific Toyota dealers have a very exciting contest that they want me to tell you about, and I'm going to do that. The grand prize of this contest includes 2 tickets to the Kanika Minolta Champions Club at Rogers Arena for the April 6th game between the Canucks and Golden Knights, and 2 Canucks jerseys. You want to win? Check out the link in our episode description or follow Toyota Pacific on Instagram and Facebook at Toyota Pacific for your chance to enter. Contest open only to residents of BC and Yukon who are of age of majority. Kanika Minolta, I think that's it, right? You know what I'm going to do? This will be a segment. If we ever run out of stuff to talk about, we're just going to call that company. Front desk. Just, hey, how do you say your name? Just curious. Jacob has the Zegras hit. Let's get to it. Pull it up, Jacob. Okay. Trevor Zegras, Anaheim Ducks against, oh yeah, you can tell, oh yeah.
That's bad. That is bad.
For those in the podcast, I urge you to seek that out because that's like,
late.
That's so late. That's so
far away from the play.
Yeah, dude, Todd McClellan looks like
McClellan's the best part of this
Zegras.
clip. he looks angry.
By the way, from last night's Utah game, seeing McClellan's reaction there, Andre Tournier, his reaction every time Utah got assessed a penalty.
The ISO cam on Tournier was so good. It was great. I love it. Gotta have more of that.
I saw someone tweeting, I can't remember exactly how they'd phrased it, but about how this game is just 2 bald coaches getting angry every time there's a penalty called.
There were some bad calls last night, both ways. There were some bad calls. The phantom trip on Filipino, that was a tough one. That was the biggest Tournier reaction, I'd say, in that game. But yeah, that's a bad hit from Zegras. That is a bad hit. Okay, let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by Greta, a great spot for all games, home and away. Obviously, it's the home of our electric watch parties, and it's a great spot to be, even if we're not there. You got the drink specials, you've got the street food menu, and of course, you've got the arcade games. you don't want to miss our next watch party. I don't know exactly when it is, but don't miss it. Our Four Nations one was super fun. All our Canucks ones are super fun, so we want to see you there. But like I said, even if we're not there, you absolutely should be. Just minutes from the arena. Come by before and after the game or whatever event you're downtown for with arcade games and the weekly drink specials. Greta Bar YVR is the place to be. 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. Okay, Harm. Where do you want to go here?
What do we got in the chat?
Let's see.
I got a lot in our private chat, and then
I see
obviously,
it.
as you mention it, the live chat will fill up with
Yeah.
anyone else's.
So Nar said this: if they trade Petey, they'll get a lousy return and he'll turn it around next season. If they keep him, he'll be bad and be stuck with him forever. Too pessimistic? What a nightmare situation for management. I've thought about this, Harm. Because obviously I said, okay, I think it might be, at least nearing time to trade Elias Pettersson, if you're not there already. But what happens if they keep him? Like, in your mind, look into your crystal ball. What happens if they keep Elias Pettersson?
Hell if I know.
Give me your
Hell if
prediction.
anybody knows.
Give me your prediction.
I need to know. I would need to know, to what extent is he hurt? Why is he like, I can't get over, why does he skate like he's aged 10 years in one season? Like, seriously, he's got no pop in his skating. And again, I wonder about the knee, but at the same time, it's fair to also say, well, if he was hurt that badly, why did he play in the Four Nations tournament? I don't know. Like, that is the central, like the big question mark I would have, because if it's, put it this way, it's not going to be just one reason why he's been struggling to this extent. There's there must be a variety of factors: mental, physical, potentially other things related to personal. Like, these guys are also human beings. You never know what people are going through. But the higher percentage blame or responsibility you could point to a physical ailment, the greater the odds that he bounces back next season. But I can't tell you what percentage of his issues relate to the knee or other injuries. And also this too,
it does at this point.
Even if it is primarily injury related, like, are you convinced it's getting better but in time for next season? Is this something that he just constantly has to manage? And I've also brought this up. There are some players in the league who are really good at playing through injuries, who even when they're at 90% health, and JT Miller was one of them, he was always banged up, always playing through bumps and bruises, he was still a really effective hockey player. And now this season, notwithstanding, because this season you could clearly tell that it was impacting his ability to drive play, and defensively he was having woes. But in previous seasons I'm talking about, like, there'd be moments where he's still piling up a lot of points, playing solid two-way hockey, and you'd hear behind the scenes that, okay, he's dealing with something here. But Pettersson, is he one of those players that as soon as the health meter drops slightly below 100%, that he's extra sensitive to those factors? Like, it's impossible for me to predict how this is going to play out when I don't know that part of the equation.
Do you remember?
Well, I'll also say this, like, I've been trying to rack I haven't done a full statistical deep dive, but it's so I shouldn't say unprecedented yet, because I haven't done the full deep dive, but how many times in NHL history have you seen a player who through his early 20s has been a point per game centerman, who's even hit 100 points, just mysteriously fall off a cliff? Like, this is a conversation I had recently with somebody, where they're like, it'd be one thing if he went from being a 90 to 100 point player to, okay, he's a 70 point guy. When has this ever really happened, where a guy goes from 90 to 100 points to, geez, he's a 55 point guy now? And the only example you can really think of off the top of my head, I should preface, is Huberdeau. But that was a completely different circumstance. I don't think that's a relevant comparable, because Huberdeau was older. He was changing teams and going to a completely different environment. I don't know, man.
We had to go back to the 1920s to find all these comparables.
Well, I still think Chichu was like the most realistic comparable.
I saw people throwing out Claude Giroux on the
but even
weekend.
then, it's like that was the most realistic one that I could find, but it wasn't really realistic because Chichu was like older when everything happened.
Yeah. Go look up Claude Giroux's DB right now.
Chichu was also a Joe Thornton merchant.
Yes.
Go look up Claude Giroux.
Giroux's an interesting one, but like
Giroux's been a good player for
he's
a
still
long
good.
time.
Yeah.
No. So listen. Okay. 93 points in 2011-12. Then there's the lockout in 2013, so it's an abbreviated season. Point per game player that season. Over point per game player again. Then he falls off. 73 points in 81 games. 67 points in 78 games. 58 points in 82 games in the 2016-17 season. Then in 2017-18, 102 points through 82 games played. So I saw people pointing out Claude Giroux lost his game for 3 years. He put up less than a point per game numbers, despite showing that he was a point per game player for 3 straight seasons and being close to it the seasons prior. He fell off a cliff for 3 seasons, but then he found his game again, and then he was a point per game player for 2 more years.
I don't buy it because league scoring was also a lot lower. Like you bring up that 2014-15 season where he scored 73 points.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie Benn won the Art Ross that year with 87 points.
Mm-hmm.
Giroux was tied for 10th in league scoring. Like that's not remotely comparable. Completely different era. I don't buy it. Like
Jumps
it was
to
maybe
102. You don't think there's any comparable there? Like 2016-17. I'm sorry, scoring wasn't that down in 2016-17. Who led the league in scoring in 2016-17?
I don't know, but I mean, yeah, sure. That's a big down year for sure.
It was McDavid with 100 points. Then it was Crosby with 89. Then it was Kane with 89. Where Giroux coming in this? Well, I mean Giroux. Yeah, like I said, Giroux.
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot lower than what we see now, though. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even
one player reaching 100 points, and actually one player reaching 90 points in a season is.
But then he jumps to 102 the next season.
Sure, but the point being, even 58 points in 2016-17, bro, this is like inflation, dude. This is like 58 points back then is like 70 points today, which is like PD is not even close to 70. He might not hit 55 points this year. Man.
Yeah. Yep. So you don't think there's any comparable?
No.
Okay. All right. There goes the Giroux idea. What do we have here? Yeah, this one from Jerry. Yeah, Jerry's just talking about Kopitar. Do we have anything else that was really pressing that we'd like to get to?
Don't think so.
Yeah, like this. Yeah, people are like, we're getting to the point where people like, do they just sit Pettersson for a game or two and hope that wakes him up? Like, I don't know. Here's one last thing on Pettersson that I wanted to bring up. Do you remember when he signed his 3-year bridge deal? He was late for training camp. So was Hughes.
Yeah.
Obviously responded to it differently. Do you remember at the start of the year how much Pettersson struggled in that season?
I do.
And at the time it was, oh, it's his wrist. It's his wrist. He's dealing with this. He's dealing with that. Then end of the season comes, media avail, and he said, I think I might be being too honest here, but I think just everything going on, not having a training camp, coming in late, contract expectations, all that, I think it all kind of got to me. And really, he did admit that, yeah, it really wasn't my wrist. It really wasn't much to do with my wrist. I struggle to have that knowledge that happened and sit here and say, yep, it's just the knee. Put him on LTIR, he'll figure it out by playoffs, and he'll be good to go. He'll be good to go next season. This is starting to feel like a situation where it becomes a JT Miller-ish situation where you say, like, yeah, I'm sure he's going to be great somewhere else, but at the money he's at, you can't take that risk of keeping him in Vancouver. And ultimately, there's people in the chat saying, like, oh, you guys are finally on board with trading Pettersson. Let's be honest here. From the start, it was, well, you have to trade Miller and then see how Pettersson reacts, and then decide. And I think all we're seeing is that Pettersson's reaction to no JT Miller on the team isn't what you hoped it would be. And you were ready for this outcome. Like, this isn't catching anybody off guard. You would have liked to see him figure it out, absolutely. But if this continues, I'm of the opinion that, yeah, you have to trade both guys. And it's not a, wow, I wish I could go back and they wouldn't have traded Miller. That's not it at all. I think you have to trade both guys.
Yeah, again, I'm going to give him the rest of this season as kind of like an audition. If he doesn't figure it out at that point, I'd be probably a little bit surprised at this point if it continues like this. You get to the offseason and he's still a Vancouver Canuck come next season.
Yep, fair enough. Someone in the chat wants Pettersson trade proposals. I mean, look, if we both are of the opinion that his value isn't going to dip too much, it's going to be similar to what we heard. Like that package for Rantanen that the Carolina Hurricanes gave up. Like that's going to be a comparable in the sense of that was a team in the Avalanche who weren't saying we want to rebuild. Like when the Canucks make a Pettersson trade, in all likelihood, because they want to keep Quinn Hughes around, it's not going to be a rebuilding trade. They're not going to be like, we want 2 first-round picks, and maybe they do. Maybe that's the route they go, but you know they're going to flip those first-round picks like they did with the Miller trade. This isn't going to be a trade where they say, we're going to get this many first-round picks, we're going to get a 18-year-old prospect that we really like. That's not going to be what we see. It's going to be one of these trades where they say, this is an NHL player we like, this is a AHL guy who might be ready to take the next step, and we think he could take that next step with us. That's going to be the type of return that the Canucks are looking for. Again, we hear about Bowen Byram. We hear about Dylan Cousins. Don't really like either of those players as being the cornerstone of a Pettersson trade package, but like this is the ballpark of where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, Eichel got what? Alex Tuck,
Yep.
Peyton Krebs in the first-round pick. That was the approximate neighborhood of that return. I struggle to think you're going to find a player of Nature's caliber as a centerpiece coming back.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issue there. One interesting sort of like long shot scenario that Pierre LeBrun was wrote about today is: have you heard all the talk about people wondering if Canes can't re-sign Mikko Rantanen? Would they entertain the idea of shopping him ahead of the deadline?
Not to pump up our own guy too much, but like, wasn't it Frank that first kind of broke that in his trade targets over at Daily
Yes.
Faceoff?
Now, first LeBron, and keep in mind he's pretty tapped in with the Canes.
Yeah.
He was saying he thinks it's quite unlikely Carolina would go down that route. That at that point they may as well, just considering how wide open the East is this year, that they may as well just keep him as their own rental. And he referenced a conversation he had with Eric Tulsky in the past, where Tulsky had said the cap space, even if you lose him, that front office views cap space as a major asset. So they're not going to be rushing to necessarily trade Rantanen for a lesser return than what they gave up for Rantanen in the first place, because you're not going to get a Nature's caliber player back.
Mm-hmm.
That said, one note LeBron added at the end was Canes have had interest in Elias Pettersson in the past. If it got to the point where the Canes knew that Mikko Rantanen isn't going to stick around, and if ownership tells them, hey, we got to monetize him, we can't lose this guy for nothing, would that be a type of scenario? He just kind of like threw it out there. Again, major long shot, and I don't think this is realistic by any stretch of the imagination, but just something to keep in the back of your mind if the Rantanen conversations start to
Here's the scenario.
Escalate.
Here's the scenario. Canucks trade Elias Pettersson for Mikko Rantanen 1-for-1 because they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to re-sign Mikko Rantanen. We think we can do it. And then they find out in year one of their 8-year deal or 7-year deal, because how would it work? It would still be, it would have to be 7 years even if you trade for him. That was a weird thing that got brought up last year. But anyways, 7-year deal. They find out in year one that, oh, maybe he was just a Nathan McKinnon merchant, because Mikko Rantanen's got a goal and 2 assists through 7 games.
I think he'll be fine in Carolina. He's gotten some rough shooting percentage luck, and the underlying numbers are great. But
watch how much rougher it gets playing with Philip Hedl.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, he at least has Sebastian Aho to play with in Carolina. Who would he play with in Vancouver?
Philip Hedl.
And that's the
Teddy
thing. Teddy
Bluger centering the line with Mikko Rantanen.
Watching Natchez in Colorado, it is like, geez, what a perfect fit he is in Colorado. And they're so different stylistically, where Rantanen's best assets are his timing, his IQ, his intelligence. He's not a dynamic driver by himself. So the problem you would run into is, like, don't get me wrong, Rantanen is a world-class elite player, but who's feeding him the puck? Who's driving zone entries? Who is the one demanding the attention of the opposition so that Rantanen has pockets of space to attack off the puck?
Here comes Teddy Bluger leading the rush with Drew O'Connor and Mikko Rantanen as the Canucks are looking for their first goal
in the third period.
It's 1-0. Okay. Yeah. I don't know, folks. We're going to keep going down this road. I'm sure we'll do it in the shows to come. Dave Hall is going to join us this week. I just sent the text. We're going to have Dave Hall on the show this week for sure. Harm, anything else you wanted to get to?
Nope.
Okay, then let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, which is brought to you by, you guessed it, Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. I nailed it. I called it. The Philadelphia Flyers took down the Edmonton Oilers. They were like plus 190 underdogs. Yeah, the Flyers took down the Oilers. I called it. All right, the Jets are minus 550 favorites to beat the San Jose Sharks tonight. I've never seen an NHL regular season game.
Minus 550?
Minus 550 are the odds for the Jets to beat the Sharks. I have never, ever seen a line that is that lopsided in my
the Sharks
life.
Played last night.
They did. They did play last night, and it was a hell of a game. Like, it was really close right to the end. Unfortunately, the Calgary Flames win in regulation, so that didn't help the Canucks' playoff chances, but we'll do the out-of-town scoreboard thing later. Jets are minus 550 favorites. I don't want to take the Sharks at plus 400, especially if we're tracking my wins here. So let's go to Vegas versus LA, where it's a bit more of a toss-up. Vegas is a slight favorite in this game, and we're going to take them. We're going to take the Vegas Golden Knights to beat the LA Kings. Vegas moneyline, minus 115 odds. You can get that over at Bet365. Open account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. Must be 90 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, Harm, final thoughts?
I really need Quinn Hughes to get healthy so that this Canucks team is entertaining to watch instead of, like, I overheard people last night talking about like going to Canucks games, like season ticket holders. They're like, it's like watching paint dry.
Yep.
Watching them on home ice this season.
And that paint just got significantly more expensive for next season, as those season ticket holders found out last week.
That by the way, is wild to me too.
So
I feel for season ticket holders.
Also,
like,
the explanation, like, people might be curious. The explanation is just that, like, we want to continue to spend to the cap. The salary cap's going up. So for those that were wondering, like, oh, is this going to affect teams? Canucks got it figured out, baby. Just jack up those prices and you can still spend to the cap, which is what they're going to do. That was the explanation that got player salaries as well was brought up. So, yeah.
This is a big market Canadian team.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. At appropriate times, raising ticket prices makes sense. Like, okay, if you're going to raise ticket prices for this season based off everything that happened last year, totally understandable, even though that was quite steep from what people were talking about. But to do it after this season, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. And I'm curious what their renewal rate is going to be, because I've already heard of people being like, not going to renew.
We could dedicate a whole show, and I think we will in the summer, to like the business of the Vancouver Canucks, like the business ops side. Don't think we're going to do that today, but like, I think it's fair to say that like it is pretty evident that like the business plan is kind of built around the product on the ice winning, right?
Yeah.
There's other teams where they're like, okay, like we can withstand a rebuild because we do this, this, and this. Just not sure if that's super prevalent or talked about. So anyways, we'll get to that. That'll be
this
an
ownership
episode.
has been always so thirsty for playoff revenue.
Yeah.
It's always, even going back to before I got into media and I was just a fan. And of course the team at times was really good. We grew up during the 2011 days, but even after that, when it was so clear that that core wasn't going to win a cup, to see them desperately try and just find short-term fixes to make the playoffs rather than looking for like the tough decisions that might hurt you short-term, but set you up for long-term success as far as actually contending for a Stanley Cup. That's been probably the biggest criticism of ownership's handling of the direction of the team. And it's ultimately, I think, a contributing factor for why things went so off the rails during the Jim Benning regime.
I do want to do an episode on the business side of the Canucks.
That sounds like fun.
I think that'd be a lot of fun.
I'd also love to do like a CBA episode at some point too, like looking at obscure things in the CBA.
I wrote an article. I'm well stocked on.
I know.
I was going to say
Harm
that
would
could be a Jacob solo episode. But
no.
maybe
That's got to be a
YouTube.
Harm thing. Like Harm's probably got so many great deep cuts from that. I think that'd be a really fun episode in the summer as well.
Love it. Okay. Harm had final thoughts. Karn pointed that out. Harm had final thoughts and extended the episode by about 6 minutes, which rarely happens. And I love it. That was good. That was really good.
There you
Jacob, final thoughts.
No final thoughts from me.
All right. Jacob had to do it. Jacob had to do it for us. Okay. We'll close it out there then. For my co-host Harman Dallin, our technical producer Jacob Lazar. My name is Dave Gugelli. Thank you so much for such an episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.